Welcome back to lesson 3 of the workflow application. Let's get into the MySQL workbench and create a new table. This table is going to be called tickets, and we're going to need to have a unique key, so tickets ID, and we're going to have specific 150 characters, 250. And then from there, we're also going to have some ticket info, which is going to be kind of the description of what this ticket pertains to. And we're off with a new table. Let's apply this to our database. And now it is in existence. And let's go ahead and put together the request. So TicketBuilder is going to be something that we're going to take over from what used to be main content. And it's not a big deal. I just don't feel like we need to delete main content and then make a new file. We'll just use what we've got here. And then we'll import it. Just we got to change the name from main content to TicketBuilder. One thing that's really important about this is that the data needs to be kind of distributed amongst the workflow and the TicketBuilder. So when we receive all the ticket information that we need to start the menus amongst the application, we need to do this all in the app. That way we can distribute that menu data around to every app that needs it, or every module that needs it. So let's go ahead and update our navbar here. And so when we click one TicketBuilder or workflow, it goes to that module. Okay, so let's go ahead and put it together here when we know that we have a valid user. And I'll build out the Ajax client-side call here. We're going to move it later on because you need to call it from other modules, so in which case it can't live in validate user. But for now, we'll put it here so that you see on load once validate user is a success, then you'll see that we're going to make that call. And let's go ahead and put together our path. Which we have not written the routes yet. So right now this wouldn't work with this path because the path doesn't exist. But what we are going to do is we're going to pass over the email to basically the server side so it can make a request. And it needs to know who exactly we're looking for within the tickets. Now the ticket ID not only does it have the name of the ticket, it's a unique name that someone made up. It's got the email of the individual, and it also has the time and date of the individual when they made it. So it's a really, the ticket ID has a lot of information in it. And email in particular is how we'll be grabbing it. So we'll be asking, hey, anybody have a ticket with this person's email? And if so, send it to us. And that's how we're going to do it. We're going to use the SQL's like concept, and then it's going to respond. I'm not telling it with the response.data. If it's an empty array, or if the length is 0, which means the same thing, that means that we know where you're asking for and there's just no data just yet. So therefore, we just want to let them know it's not broken. Now, obviously, if something else happens, we're going to say, another result. So ticket info is something we're going to need to spread around. Once we get that data, we're going to fill up this array that's been empty right now, and then we'll spread that ticket info amongst our modules. So, with no further ado, let's write server-side API for the get ticket info. First, I would recommend writing basically a new file called tickets.js. So let's get to the API folder, and I'm basically just gonna, I'll be honest with you, the routes here is just gonna be a copy of the workflow routes. Nothing's changed in that concept. We're just gonna be routing to a new file. But from the workflow.js, I just copied all that page and pasted it into the tickets. Because you're doing the same thing. It's creating a CRUD application, create, read, update, and delete. But we're not doing the workflow anymore. We're just doing the tickets. So let's just rename, the requests to fit what we're doing. I mean, in here, I'm just creating a new ticket. And I'm going to come with it with a ticket ID and ticket info. So, insert into tickets instead of workflow, and then you set your keys and values. That's pretty easy. So the add, post new ticket, we're all good here. Let's just make sure that the path matches. And so this is going to get all server user ticket info based on ticket ID. Now we're clearly going to ask for all the ticket info based on this person's email. So select all from the tickets table where the ticket ID is like, and then we have the email. Now remember, like means you're going to have these percentages, and I'm going to toy around with this a little bit. The reason being is because the ticket ID does not equal the email. It's in the email, surrounded by 2 colons. So that's why we're using like. It doesn't equal. All right, so the update is a put, and similar to the workflow, we're going to update tickets, and we're not going to data doesn't exist here. We have ticket info that can be updated. And in which case, whatever matches the ticket ID, we'd like to change that ticket info. You will not be able to change the ticket ID. Once it's named, that's it. You can delete it and start over, but no updating ticket IDs. Ticket delete is going to be something we're going to use obviously here on the server side as well. So we'll just redo the SQL statement to fit in tickets instead. And we'll have a specific ID here. And then once that ID is selected, we'll know which one we need to delete. So we've done an update. We've got a get. We've got post. We've got a delete. So we're doing pretty good on the server side. Let's go over to the client side. And let's go ahead and back out, get back into our workflow, and let's go ahead and start the server back up. So I have screwed up the navigation here, as you can see. I need to go back and change it. But we also need to get a timestamp in here too. So like I said, when you write these ticket IDs, they're going to have a time and a date, and I need to have it formatted in a way that I can sort it. And so in which case, timestamp needs to be designed in a very specific way. Just like a lot of my other applications, I'm going to go ahead and literally copy a timestamp.js from another application because it's so curated to the way I need my timestamp. Now, timestamp is just going to be a function that I'm going to export. I'm going to basically get your standard date and then your standard time, lay it out from, starting out from year, month, day, and then we go hour, minute, second. And we're also going to have like an AM and a PM. And we need to make sure that anything like if the hours are below 10, it has to have a 0 in front of it. So I'm going to curate all the returns from these get date concepts or new date concepts. I'm going to basically curate it to match the string that I need. So anything, that I don't want to have military time. So anything after 12 hours is going to be minus 12 hours. And any month that is under 10 months, I'm going to need to add a 0 in front of it. So it says, for instance, 09 for September or 08 for August. That way, it's going to work in my drop-down menus in the future. It's going to work in my requests. They all need to have this to match up with my date timestamp. This is a very common thing. I think that these IDs, you can use a random ID that generates, and I have done that before, but it brings no value. It's an identifier that's unique if that's all you need. But if you say the unique identifier pertains not only the date and millisecond, down to the millisecond when the thing was created, and by the user who it was created, and then whatever you named the ticket, you're bringing significant more value to an ID, a unique ID, than just a random number. You can bring this up and run it through drop-down menus. You can identify it visually. When it comes through logging, you'll be able to sort it based on your time and based on whoever wrote it or whoever punched it through. So keep that in mind when you think, what am I going to make an ID out of? What's unique? Well, how else can you use this ID to your benefit? That's something I'll always push for. I don't know why random numbers do anybody really any good in most cases. So let's keep watching me basically copy a timestamp.js from another application for everyone here. And coincidentally, I'm just kind of giving you my theory on as to why I do this. It's just common sense. And for some reason, I wrote really fast and skipped out on quite a bit of the function or the variables here. So I will be back to finish up hours, original, minutes, things like that. I just decided to move on for some reason. But when the error shows up, I'll be back to fix it. Here I am importing my timestamp function that's not finished. And knowing full well that I'm going to need it when I build my ticket. You can see all those errors over there on the right, in the bottom right. But we'll move on for now. We'll come back to timestamp. I just need to know that's in existence. So one big thing is I need a button group. Just like on our workflow, this is a really concise way to let the user choose their functionality, whether you want to add, delete, or update something. So I'm just going to basically copy the button group that existed on the workflow and then set it up for success over here on my TicketBuilder.js module. And it's going to be doing the same thing as it does on the workflow. As opposed to a new step, I'll be, adding, deleting, or editing. And which is, this is going to determine when I click on it, not only will it determine what functionality I'll be showing, like based on what functionality is chosen, a different panel will show up. So if I'm deleting something, I really don't need to show, the input field panels. So this is going to determine things like that. Let's go ahead and pass that ticket info that we grabbed over to our modules. So the app is going to pass that down. And now we can start building out the panels that we're gonna see based on our functions. Okay, so it's saying, hey, if there are any tickets, if when we went out and requested tickets for this user, something came back, as long as it's not an empty array, I'm going to build a select menu, and that select menu is going to list all the tickets from that user. Now, we don't need to show the select menu during the add function because we're adding something. So I'm only going to show the select menu if our function is edit or delete. Just common sense again. You don't want to kind of drag your client or your users into something where it could be confusing. So you kind of guide them by removing things they can't use. Now, once something is selected from this form control, we'll be able to know like which ticket's going to be updated or deleted. So we want to set active ticket based on whatever one is selected in this control or in this select menu. Coincidentally, it's easier to just do this. I'm going to do a function called selectTicket, and then within that, I will set activeTicket. I will also, since I'm bringing it into a function, it's going to have the ability to bring a lot more options to it as opposed to just setting a hook. So let's have our first option of default with select a ticket spelled incorrectly. But that's going to come into something I can fix later. We do need that default for the first option. And you'll see, as always, what I'll be doing with that. And then I'll be mapping through the data beyond that option. So as you can see, our drop-down list will go as long as however many tickets this individual has. And we'll be bringing in the tickets via our props from App.js. Now here, the ticket ID, like I said, the ticket ID is actually it's rather long. It has a date, it's got the email, and then it's got the actual name of the ticket. So I'm just going to make a substring. We'll be doing that here in a second. Let me just go ahead and finish up what I've done here on the timestamp JS. We need to go ahead and fill in the rest of the variables that I was calling. So I've made my way back, and I'm declaring what hours is. And I'm going to do an hours original so that I can determine if it's over 12, I need to go ahead and just bring it down to another 1. So I've just kind of tricked it into doing it this way. Not very scientific. It's as basic JavaScript as you could possibly get. Now, if somebody wanted to install Moment and just kiss all this goodbye, you're welcome to. I have installed Moment sometimes when things get complicated. This is so wildly uncomplicated that I just wrote it. I didn't want to install a plugin. It's very common of me to do that. If I don't think that I need it, I'm not going to probably install something. But as you can see, it's kind of like a Band-Aid. You just got to tear it off and get it over with and move on with your one function that gets called quite a bit and does work exactly the way you want. So we're good. Now I'm doing a ternary operator and letting it know if I've decided to choose the function of delete, I shall show this panel. Oh, actually, this is the function is not delete. So delete would show basically it would have a confirmation window. It's like, are you sure you want to delete the item you selected? And this is function does not equal delete within the ternary operator. So in which case, instead of deleting, we're doing the what would you like to add or update concept. So here, as you can see, we've got the text area and the input field with the correct naming functions of ticket title. And let's go ahead and name this. I want to say it's ticket price. Or ticket info, sorry. Anyway, so moving on to our button. Now remember that there's 2 options here for this button. We could either delete or be adding something or editing something. And based on the function that we've chosen or the user has chosen, we shall show a different button. We don't really care. The fields can stay the same because you're either adding or editing. You need those fields. However, different functions based on if adding or editing. Now you can consolidate those 2 if you want to get carried away, which I've done before. But in this case, I'm going to actually make 2 functions. One function for the edit button, one function for the add button. And let's go ahead and tie up these loose ends right here. I've got a mistake on my app. Let's go swing over. And as you can see, my active module, I've got the wrong thing written down. As you can see, I need TicketBuilder. It needs to be there. It's going to be my default. And it shall be showing, TicketBuilder needs to be showing down here instead of main content. And workflow will show up once workflow is selected. So those were swapped. But you'll see the result now when I click on the button up there that the correct module will appear because I fixed it. So we're using button block to make sure that these buttons go all the way across and look pretty. Button block is something I'm using for, that's Bootstrap 4. It will not be allowed in Bootstrap 5. You'll be doing something called W-100. That will make your button go instead of BTN block. So just a quick heads up, we are using Bootstrap 4 here, so there's a couple slight CSS issues. Let's get back to the function of select ticket. Once somebody has selected a ticket, we need to figure out which ticket they selected. Now, if the value of the ticket of the option they selected is default, which remember is the first one, let's just stop it. We know that don't mean anything. They didn't select anything. They just reset their menu. So if it's default, it's going to be returned false. Not default, we need to set that ticket as active. That way we know what ticket we're dealing with. Now let's move on. As you can see, I'm installing Axios, and I'm going to go ahead and write my addTicket post. Now this is obviously the client side. Go ahead and get our path together. I'll have to come back because that's only a portion of the path. Now this is the object I will be sending them to the server side. It's going to have 2 values and 2 keys. The ticket ID is being built now. It's going to have that timestamp curated just the way I want. It's going to have my email with a colon separating the two, and another colon. And then that's going to have the title of the new ticket, straight out of the input field. Now this is our new object we'll be sending. And also the ticket info is going to be something we need to send as well. Validate, obviously, is something we need to make sure that something is in these fields. The text array and the text input field have to have something. So I'm going to validate by asking it to run a loop through and find if the user has typed something up. If not, they will add an error class to that field saying, hey, there's nothing here. And if I find out there's an error class based on validate, I'm going to stop everything and say you're missing something. You didn't put one of the fields together. I'm going to return false so it all stops. However, if it did work, we're going to go ahead and send the request. Let's go ahead and pass over the user email, the config, show alert, everything we're going to need to get this request running, or this post. So here's the object being passed. Here's the configuration, so we know that it's a legitimate session. Now, once that's been successful, we've got a response. It's going to be a response of whatever our data is or whatever our error may be. Now, the errors are obviously going to be something more of like probably 500 errors. Those are more server errors. We could encounter errors, otherwise, but for the most part, this is when something really went wrong with the server side. Now, if something didn't go wrong with the server side, and we're in this bracket of code, the response bracket of code, it's a success. And we're going to let them know it's a success by telling them and showing them on the show alert function. And not only that, we're going to convey that we even confirmed the title was added. All right, so like I said, we can't have that call to the API tickets down and hiding invalidate user. Let's move it out to a get tickets function. Now the get tickets just gets called. That way we make it versatile. We can pass it around to the different modules. They can call get ticket. So every time they do something, they'll go and get the latest. We'll pass that function down not only to the modules, but to when validate tickets gets taken care of. So get tickets is versatile, lives in the app, and it's used throughout. Let's make sure that everything is being passed. I feel like we can even pass an argument through. So let's just do that to make sure that it gets the correct email. So addTicket's going to grab my email. Okay, so now that we've got addTicket done, let's go for the edit. Now the edit's obviously going to be a new function that determines which ticket are you wanting to edit. So it's going to base itself on that drop-down select menu. So it's going to be a lot more of the same. Just like the addTicket, we're still going to need to validate. We're still going to need to do a lot of stuff. We still have to have the path to it where it is on the back end. Now keep in mind that is not the correct path. You have to type in the API router. So we'll be back to do that as well. It's just like the add, we still need to do the object. But we're just doing the active ticket because this is the thing where we're going to pass that ticket. This is the one we're referring to, and this is the new information. Now the response, based on whether it worked or it didn't, is exactly the same as add. You're going to see that using Axios, it's the same steps. It might say post, put, delete, whatever, but the steps are very similar. Looks like I have accidentally installed Express. So let's get that out of there. Sometimes I just hit the wrong button. And we're good to go. It's logging in. And it looks like since we don't have any information just yet, we've got an error. And we don't want that. So I can't just do a map. I need to determine whether something's there before I map it or it'll break. And there is an easy fix to this. And basically what I'm going to do is kind of check to see, instead of a blank array, it's going to be null instead of an empty array. That way I'm going to say, hey, if the ticket's if it starts off as null, we don't need to go any further. I mean, this is a big no-no, and we can't map anything, as opposed to an empty array. So this just stops it butt cold right here. Same thing as here. Just don't even bother. If it's still null, it never got updated, I'm not going to bother. And it says no data yet. Okay, so let's make our new ticket. A little test here. Looks like we don't have a value of something. Looks like it's missing. So what I'm seeing is I'm not closing the parentheses on name. Within the bracket, name equals, and then there's ticket info. That ticket info has a semicolon or a colon. It starts off with a colon and never ends. It's very common. It'll drive and it'll cause havoc. I'm missing a single colon on a bunch of the values. So let's go ahead and get that in there, and it's a typo. And then here's a reset. If everything worked, I'm going to reset those fields to nothing. And that's a real common thing. I'll do that on add and update. All right, here we go again. Let's try to add a ticket. Still reading it at the null value. And I still see the issue with that. So there are more. There we go. There's one. More typos. Use the search to find out if there are any more. It's an easy fix. It's just frustrating. I would imagine that JavaScript is probably a little easier. Like, for instance, if I go through and do this in PHP and let me update these paths that need to be corrected, I need to make sure that they match the router. If I was going to do this in PHP and I missed a semicolon, it would have not worked. So you got to give JavaScript a little bit of credit that it doesn't care all the time about everything, but colons, yes, or commas, yes, and parentheses, yes. There we go. As you can see in SQL Workbench, we were able to have an affected row of 1. That means it worked. Now, I'm going to go back and detail in my response, because this is a really important thing. If an affected row is like 0, that means it found what you're or it didn't find what you're talking about, and nothing changed. If your affected row is above 0, then you have success. So it's not like a 404. It's not like it was broken. It just doesn't know what you're talking about. That would mean res.data affected row equals 0. However, if it does know what you're talking about and it did work, then res.data affected rows will not equal 0. So this is another way to call out, hey, it's not working, or it is working, and despite the fact that there was or wasn't an error. So let's just do the basic grab all tickets. Now, remember that the email address lives within the ticket. It is not equal to ticket ID. It's within the ticket ID, as you can see here in the response. What we needed to do is go : email : The reason being is so we need to make sure that it really is me. So let's make sure that the key is in there with our map. That's something we need to do. Ticket ID is the correct thing, not ID. That's not what we called it. We called it ticket ID. And let's go ahead and make this look pretty, because if you notice, the select menu's bulging out. And so let's make it lay together flush with the other columns. There we go. Here we go. There's our tickets. And as you can see, it's a very long name. Let's do a substring so we don't have to see that whole name. It'll still have the value of the entire name, but as to the reader, the user, they're just going to see what you titled it, because what do they care? They already know their email. There you go. Let's get rid of that colon real quick. So +1 will move the substring 1 more over, and now it'll just be the name of their ticket. A little more useful for them. So now we have the option to select one ticket. This is where we go and get just one, the ticket that's been selected through the select menu. So as you can see, it's being very specific about a ticket, whatever the active ticket is, which we've saved. Just like all the others, now we're doing response or error. And my classic alert if something did or didn't work. So if there's a response that does have a ticket ID and a ticket title, I'm going to fill our text area and our text input with the data selected. So I'd like to go get this ticket. This ticket data information will show up in the fields. So we will populate those fields with the data you've selected. Now when it comes to delete, that looks like I had a misspelling. Now let's go ahead and write that different. It's another get, but it's not all the info now. It's just one. So as you can see, I copied the original one, the original get, and I'm tailoring it to be a little more specific about. Instead of like, I'm going equal parameters ticket ID. So it's not a blanket rule. anymore. It's now a specific. And here we are, getting that data that I requested. First ticket, looks like we've got a small problem. We are receiving it correctly. The problem is, you see how that has the data has the brackets around it? So it's an object with brackets. That means it's iterable. If you have something iterable, you have to have an index number ready to go. So you cannot have res.data.ticket ID. I'm checking here to see, hey, I saved this stuff. Is it coming in as an object? It doesn't seem to be iterating, so I toy around with it for a little bit. But the real reason this thing is, you can save, let's put it this way. The best way to describe it is, I saved my data object. It was JSON. I saved it into a database. A SQL database saved it as a string. However, when I requested it, it came back out and it was converted from a string to an object, which is what I wanted. I didn't have to convert it back to a string, or I didn't have to parse it. It knows what I'm doing. So I suggested, hey, are you giving me a string? Because I know you saved it as a string, and it's saying no. I'm giving you an object, and here I am asking type of, and it says no, I'm giving you your object like you asked. So you can get that parse out of there. And I'm going to realize here in a second that res.data needs an index. Even though there's only one iteration, it still needs to be represented as 0. So let's go and confirm our API connection. There we go. API connection is working. Now let's do an update. Looks like the update's working correctly. Let's go around and try to see if delete works. And be a little more specific as when we copy and paste. Let's do some fixing on a misspelling. And let's build our delete function on the ticket side, on the client side. Looks like that addTicket needs to have a validate in there, but we'll get back to that. Okay, so which ticket? We're familiar with this. I just want to know what ticket was selected. And if the value of which ticket is default, we're stopping everything. They just reset their menu. And make sure that you make sure you got your syntax correct. Now let's write our path correctly to our server side. And let's go ahead and put in which ticket we're talking about. And once we go again with our response, was it an error or was it a success? We shall find out. Our typical, hey, that didn't work. So when I do a delete, I have started using something called confirm. It's a box. And I'm just going to toggle that box up and down if someone wants to delete something. Just like all the others, if I hit delete, it doesn't do anything. It just shows a confirmation box that has "Are you sure?" written in it. So, this is what you might think. I'm just showing you a box when you hit delete. Now, when you open that box up and it has yes or no, the no just goes back to the default. However, if you hit delete ticket and you show that box and it says yes, that little button yes actually does do the delete, and it does use Axios. So this is another way to protect your users from making a big mistake and deleting something they don't want. I mean, the classic, hey, my cat jumped on my keyboard and now I can't find what I was looking for because it got deleted. We don't want that to happen. So just the big step in the deletion concept is, are you sure? And then we go through this protocol. It's so simple. Just the way that we can hide or show this panel, why not? And it does look, it does give the user a little confidence where I got somebody backing me up. If I make a mistake, it's going to stop me. And as you can see, on click, now we bring in the delete. Delete function is called here. And we're going to need a couple parentheses. Not going to work. Yeah, so we need to go back. And as you can see, deleteTicket's going to need still. I'll figure it out. There we go. Boom. Something's still not working. Looks like I got a 404 error. We will find out. So I'm not sending an object, I'm sending a parameter. So this being the case, affected row 1, that means it was changed. And now we're working. So let's go a little bit back into here. And just the same as the others, if affected row is 0, then it didn't find what you were talking about. And if affected row is greater than 0, then it worked. And then we'll go ahead and grab the tickets after everything's been deleted. That way we can have an updated list. And we bring in that's why we had to bring in the get tickets from app. And then from here we're going to go ahead and close our confirm box because we've made that deletion. So let's test this stuff. I'm going to make a ticket, give it some info, added it. I'm going to edit that information. Done. Now I'm going to delete that. We need to reset. Our menu needs to go back to the top. That's what selected index means. So the drop down needs to go to the top when it's done. So let's do another update. Delete and deleted. As you can see, we are done. And I want to double check on this security for my email. Remember, my email is surrounded by colons to make sure that it is my email and no one else's. I want to make sure the colons are represented on either side of it. So let's fix that. I'm going to run through it. It's going to be a few minutes of me screwing around with this thing. As you can see, what I'm looking for is I want to build those colons out so I can hunt down them. All right. So back in our workflow, now that I have the data for those IDs, I'm going to add that data. As opposed to we had those ticket 1, ticket 2, ticket 3 from the last one, I'm adding that select a ticket option. And this function, when it's selected, is going to be called populateFields because that's the function we had earlier. I'm just going to rename it. So same menu, new function name on the workflow. And here's how I'm going to do it. As the other, I'm passing the ticket info down to now the workflow and replacing these static tickets. And within doing that, I need to do a few things based on our new menu. So no data yet for this guy when he's logged in. And so we're going to start making our, now that we have a new ticket, I'm going to add a new step. So it knows, the API call out, says this guy's got a ticket called new step or whatever, new ticket. So now we're basically putting in some tasks for this ticket. We're going to name it. We're going to put some time involved to it. As you can see, like, it's not updating. So I've got a problem here with how long is it going to take? It just keeps saying 20 minutes. It only worked on the post. It's not working on the update. And here's all my old ones. So as you can see, ticket 1, ticket 2, and ticket 3 irrelevant now. Those were from an old tutorial, and they're worthless because they don't match our naming convention for our IDs. So I deleted those, and now we're just going to work with the working ones. So I still have a broken, as you can see, my payload is not firing off. It's sending 20 minutes still. So something on the client side is broken. What I'm going to do is I'm going to determine, hey, if there's something new here, as you can see right before I do a put to Axios, if you see a new step price, like new time or money, use that field's value as opposed to the existing one. So temp step data active step dot step price will assign it whatever the value is if there's a value in that field. As you can see, I'm updating it to 3 hours. Now it says 3 hours. So now it is working. I also need to do a little bit of a fail-safe in case it's not, the option is not there. If that step price field doesn't exist, then it'll cause an error. So first I'm going to say, hey, does this step price exist? Yes. If so, is there a value? Yes. Okay, well then that is the new value of the step price. And here it is working. Okay. We'll see you next time.